discover more about the nature of reality and help create a better life for yourself and the rest of the planet. My name is Icke and I've created a process called Draw Your Reality. For more information, you can go to my website, nikkipalmer.com, and receive a free gift that I put together just for you.
Well, welcome to the show, everybody. As you know, I'm Derek Brose, and this is Global Witness. And as you most likely see on your screen there, the amazing David Icke.
Gosh, so just walk.
So I'm sure most of my viewers, David, already know who you are. But David has been at the forefront of what I would call the truth movement, of an understanding of the illusions that exist in this world to everyone. And I believe that David is probably more responsible for waking people up to those truths than anyone else. He's been doing this for about 30 years. I could tell you that his books that I know of have been distributed. I personally have sent, I'd say probably I've purchased probably 100 of your books for different people and sent it to. So I've supported the cause for certain. And
you're the one that's bought some then.
So I wanted to, because you do have a new book out now, and everything you need to know. So I wanted to just quickly, if you could just give everybody a brief explanation of that book, and then I do have questions that people have emailed, and I have personal questions for you, because my channel specifically focuses on the spiritual and our absence of it. So we'll definitely get into that. But if you could just give a brief explanation of what this latest book, Everything You Need to Know, is about.
Well, everything you need to know but have never been told, it is. And it's, of course, not absolutely 100% every last syllable, dotted I and crossed T that you need to know. What it is what people need to know to understand the world as it really works, rather than the one that we're told to believe in. And so I have pulled together a vast number of subjects and showed how they connect, how, the introduction of 5G connects to the banking system, connects to Middle Eastern wars, connects to the suppression, talking of the subject you've introduced, the suppression of the knowledge of reality and the very reality that we're experiencing. So, and the nature of the who we are. All these things connect, and why over centuries, actually thousands of years, the same unfolding agenda has continued. People are born, people die, people are born, people die, and yet this agenda moves on, and it's founded on the incessant centralization of power. Because when there's a few and you want to control the many, you have to centralize decision making. The more diversity there is, the less control any central cabal is going to have. So what you do is incessantly centralize power. And every point you do that, fewer and fewer people are dictating to the lives of more and more people. So we started out in tribes, and the tribes made the decisions about what happened in the tribes. Then we had this point where we created what are called nations. That was amalgamation of lots of tribes. Now a few people at the center of the nation are dictating to all the former tribes. And now in Europe, we have the European Union, which is an amalgamation of countries being dictated to by a few people from the center. In other words, dictating to all those nations that are all those other tribes. And if you look at the so-called trade groupings, they are also centralization of power operations. And so we've moved on and on and on to the point now, and this is where everything fits in. I'm talking about trade groups and talking about, centralization of power. And that brings me into something that most people wouldn't think connects at all, and that's Silicon Valley. But it does, because what is the greatest expression of the centralization of power in the world today than the centralization of power over what we see and don't see.
For sure.
Which is what the Silicon Valley internet giants like Google and Facebook, etc., are actually doing. We've got this small area of land in California now from which what we see overwhelmingly in the world as more and more information goes onto the internet and away from other sources, dictating what we see and don't see. And what does that dictate? It dictates perception. Perception comes from information received, whether it's a personal experience or what people see on the internet or in a newspaper. And what else comes from perception? Human behavior. What we'll challenge, what we won't challenge, what we'll do, what we won't do, what we'll accept, we won't accept, the way we see things or don't see things, all comes from our perception of a situation. And the perception of the situation comes from information received. So control of information controls human perception, which controls human behavior. This is where we're going. And once the control of information goes into as fewer hands as it is now, so does human control on a scale we've not seen before up to this point in terms of centralization of power. And of course, all this censorship of alternative information that we're seeing is all part of this master plan, if you like, of dictating what people see and don't see, and thus the perceptions people have or don't have.
You know, I was an executive at Microsoft for 4 years running Windows strategy. So obviously I've seen how it operates, but I can tell you what I found to be remarkable about it is that people are participating without really knowing they're participating.
Exactly.
And this is the terrifying part of it, is that as the group Anonymous, which I was very involved in its early stages, because it was about getting the information out, and the mask itself was to prevent people from judging who was giving the message. So they wouldn't judge them as poor, stupid, black, white, educated, uneducated, rich, poor, didn't matter, right? So that was the entire point of the Anonymous mask. And it functions very well for that. And with that, the Anons getting information. Now, the people think that Anonymous were a bunch of people in their basements, in their mom's basements. There's people at extremely high levels of corporations. That's where the suit and the tie with the question mark where the head was. You don't know who this, and it doesn't have a head. It's a group. And all of the group has the same idea in mind, which is getting the information out to the people. And what Anons had done, David, is as you began to continually dig deeper into the information, and WikiLeaks information would come out, as you got deeper and deeper, eventually you ran up against a wall where there was nothing there, and there was nobody to actually identify. And you began to recognize that there is a far more evil source to this that is far more powerful than anybody knows. And that became one of the startling things for me in an awakening that, and I've read a little bit about, how your awakening took place, but mine was instantaneous. Overnight, within, it seemed like 10-minute period of time, everything I thought I knew, I had completely different information about it. I knew everything was wrong from the top to the bottom, you name it. And, growing up in the church and being part of Christianity my entire life, I could recognize the lie and the truth in the same line. And that's how people are lured into this, is that, before I left Microsoft, there started to be a larger presence of NSA, where there was an entire building there that basically housed people from the government. And I recognized something's going on.
Well, I mean, I've been writing about this, and I actually write about this in detail in Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told, because what you're describing is what I've been describing for years. The question, when I started on this 30 years so far, and I've hardly started yet, exploration of how the world's controlled and who by, what you have to keep doing is going down the rabbit hole. I see, I'm not knocking it. Anyone who's putting out information that shouldn't, that according to the system, shouldn't be circulating, I break into a round of applause. But I see so much of the alternative media just walking around and round the rim of the rabbit hole, and they think they've sussed it, but they're actually not even in the rabbit hole yet. They're just on the periphery. If you keep going, you start to realize the world is nothing like the place. Not a little bit not like you thought it was, nothing like you thought it was. So one of the things I've done is kept going, as you've described. Okay, this Silicon Valley and these massive giants, they have this power. Then you ask the question, well, why are they allowed to have this power? And why have they got this power? And of course, you very quickly realize, well, they've got this power because they're not ultimately the ones controlling it. So then you ask the question, who would want the power they have? Well, anyone that wants 24 surveillance of the population, where the population overwhelmingly give you their information because you don't even have to go looking for it. You want to know what someone's having for dinner? Well, just go into Facebook. Secondly, if you want this power, if you have this power, well, what you want if you're in authority is you want to control what people see and don't see for all the reasons I've just described. And thirdly, this is going further on in the rabbit hole, which 5G and all this technology, the smart technology is all about. You want to connect the human brain to artificial intelligence, so artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. And of course, you'll know this, but a lot of people who are going about their lives don't realize this, how much the Facebooks and the Googles and the Amazons are at the cutting edge of artificial intelligence technology. So what you've got in a one-stop shop is, in one small area of the world, is these three, and there are many more, of course, but these three pillars of power that you want. And when I say you want, well, who does want them? Well, the Pentagon wants them. The intelligence networks, you've mentioned one, the National Security Agency and the CIA want that power. Mm-hmm. And I've been saying for a long time and writing for a long time now, and I go into it in detail in the book, if Google and Facebook, etc., did not exist, then the military-industrial complex, the military-industrial intelligence complex, would have to invent them. I say they did. I say their fronts for that complex have been from the start. And this is how I would explain what's going on. The idea from the start was to make the internet the absolute foundation of human society. This is why people like DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, claims that it created the internet with military technology. Mm-hmm. What you want to do, and what you have to do to start with, is give people what they want. What you want to become the pillar of society, the very foundation of it, the internet, has to be something that people want. So in the early days, what you do is you have the free flow of information. And people say, oh, this is great. You can say what you like and have your own opinion and talk to people around the world, isn't it brilliant? At the same time, you start seed funding and bringing forth companies that you want eventually to be near monopolies of that internet and its communications. What you then do, again, when you start, is you've got to build these companies up, the Googles, the Facebooks, etc. You have to make them to be something that people want. So what did we have in the early days? Here we go again. The free flow of information. You could post what you want, say what you want. We had freedom of expression. Then you reach a point where your goal, first of all, of making the internet the very foundation of human society is achieved. We're there now, to a point where it's irreversible. At that point, and at the point where we're also have reached, which is this near monopolistic situation with these internet giants, then you say we now have the power to start making the internet and making these companies what they were planned to be all along. Not by the people that overwhelmingly work at them. I mean, it's all compartmentalized, as you've talked about. I mean, the real force behind them. And so what we're seeing now is the censorship frenzy against alternative thought, information, and facts. And we're seeing this internet being transformed so that what suits the cabal, the military intelligence industrial complex, is left, and that which doesn't, i.e. the free flow of information and opinion, is deleted. And that's what we're seeing. And that's one of the key reasons, there are many, but one of the key reasons why they're running down newspapers now and other forms of media. Because once you get the information onto the internet, then you can kick in the algorithms and let AI do the censorship for you.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing that I think that the reason why many people have a difficult time waking up, David, is that they can't imagine how this conspiracy would work.
Oh,
But
yes.
when you come from my world and you come from the technological world of finance, of technology, you recognize that when you take that technology to if I invented a technology, I take that to a group of investors, and those investors then decide on whether they're going to give me money. And as a result, the people that are deciding whether they're going to give me money for this company, they'll tell me what they want my company to be. And so it always goes with the financing. It's always going to, if you ever want to follow anything.
That's why politicians make the decisions they do, because they're owned by money. It's exactly
they're owned by money. Yeah, and all of this goes down to the reserve. And, you know, like I've said for quite a long time, is that to me, when I read in scripture about prophecy and it says mystery Babylon, I don't think it's a mystery any longer. I believe that we've got mystery Babylon. We've got the United States dollar that is the backing dollar for every currency in the world. You've got the Federal Reserve, which has unstated a debt of well over $100 trillion. And you've got a stated debt of 21 or 22 trillion dollars. There isn't enough gold and silver and other value in the world to pay back that debt. We are most definitely looking at a financial collapse that is intended to happen. And
exactly.
Yeah, and in that all yields from the establishment of these. So there's always going to be a consolidation of power through the fall of the dollar. The 2008 collapse of the dollar, which is exactly what it was. It was an initial collapse of the dollar, which they gave the excuse that it was the mortgage meltdown. But the reality is the dollar's value went to zero. And that's where quantitative easing comes in to increase the value, because just like a cryptocurrency, the value of a fiat currency is determined by the usage, because it's a faith-based currency, right? In God we trust is written right on it. That's because the dollar itself is God.
Yeah, and well, if you don't believe in it, it's got no value. It's only
none.
Belief in it.
Yes,
value.
And the belief in the dollar comes by way, the parameters utilized to gauge that belief is how much you spend it. So quantitative easing was established where the government was printing $150 billion a month and force feeding it to organizations. That's why every road and every bridge was rebuilt in the entire country. They were force feeding it. And I've had relationships with financiers in the technological business where these investment groups, all forms of investment groups, were giving hundreds of billions of dollars to invest in technology to make sure it was getting spent. That would then justify the value of the dollar, and it would raise back up again. And that's why if you go on the dark web, there is a crowdfunding for hired paid killers on the dark web. And you would think that it would be Obama or some world leader that would be the #1 person on there as far as that they wanted killed. But in reality, it's not. It's Ben Bernanke, who is the one that established quantitative easing. So he is the most sought after man. He's probably heavily in hiding, but this is how this functions. It all functions through the reserve and the reserve banking system. And that's where it's also going to fall. Mystery Babylon falling from a scriptural standpoint says in a single hour, right? And then nobody will be able to buy and sell. It becomes quite obvious that the abominations that were spoken of in scripture is the abomination of the dollar itself and forcing people on, going from Saddam Hussein selling oil, right? So it is a petrodollar, selling oil, willing to sell oil in his own currency. And he knew quite a bit about the ancients, which is why he has, you know, on the Saddam Hussein currency, if you actually looked at it, on one side it had his face, and on the back side it had Enki. So he was quite familiar with where he came from and who he played in these roles.
Well, these people are. I mean, one of the things that I've been tracking and exposing for the last 30 years is the bloodlines that came out of Babylon into Europe and became this basically cabal of the modern world. But, you know, explaining how it works is real simple. I understand that, you know, people look at the world and it seems a mass of random events. And so people think, well, how can there be a global conspiracy? How can they organize these random events? Well, the point is they're not random. And I have this concept of a spider's web with a spider in the center of the web, the spider being the core of where it's all coming from. And the strands immediately around the web are the most exclusive secret societies. Then as you come out, you meet the secret societies that we do know about, the Freemasons, the Knights of Malta, the Knights Templar. And then you meet what I call the cusp organizations as you come out from the spider. And these are the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, which has been fundamental in selling the global warming situation to justify the transformation of global society. And then you come through the cusp organizations and you come into governments and government agencies and banking systems and corporations and corporate media and what have you. And in the world of the scene, where we live our lives, it appears that there's loads of random decisions going on. Now, there will be, but within them, the society changing, the society directing decisions are actually being made and played out in the world of the scene, human society, that have come from this spider in the center of this web. And so how don't we know about this? Because if you look at secret societies, what are they? They are levels of initiation where the people at the bottom of the initiation pyramid have no idea what the people at the top know. I mean, the vast majority of Freemasons in the world are on the bottom 3 levels of degree in the Scottish Rite and other rites. The blue degrees, that's where most of them go. They never go any higher. And then you go up to the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite, and they'll know things that the bottom 3 levels of degree don't know. And indeed, there are other levels beyond the official 33rd degree, which will know things that the 33rd degree doesn't know. So it's compartmentalization, where people are only allowed into the next level of degree, which is what? Knowledge, if that level of degree decides that you're worthy of it. Now, if you then look at corporations, governments, government agencies, universities, any organization virtually, they are compartmentalized pyramids where the people at the bottom of the pyramid, where the vast majority are, have no idea what the people at the top of the pyramid know. So you can work for Microsoft, you mentioned earlier, you can work for Google, you can work for Facebook and all these things, Amazon, and you'll know enough to do your job, to make your contribution, to put your little piece in the puzzle into the whole, but you won't know what you're doing and how that connects with what other people are doing. Only the few at the top will know that. Then you go beyond the ones officially at the top into the shadows where the real power is. So the number of people necessary to control and to enforce is very, very few. Very few people have to know for it to play out, because most of the people who are making it happen don't know. Oh, over here, Bill, this is what we're going to do now, okay? Can you implement this? And Bill goes away and implements it. He doesn't know why. He's just doing his job. This is how the system works. keep people in ignorance of the fact that every day they are contributing to their own enslavement and their children's enslavement, their families' enslavement every day without realizing that's what they are doing. And that is what's happening in AI. You know, I see some of these AI people talking, and they are promoting AI because they're obsessed with AI. It's their thing. But when you ask them, well, hold on a minute, when this AI is connected to the human brain, which people like Ray Kurzweil at Google again is talking about by 2030 or that kind of period, who controls the AI and how it affects the human mind? And then they suddenly go quiet. They've never even thought about it. Oh no, let's see what we can do, and let's see what we can do more. And this is how it works. The vast majority of people have no idea that they are daily contributing to the very conspiracy they deny exists.
Yeah, you know, it's remarkable though. Everybody sells out. You know, it's kind of the scriptural Seau or Esau, what people, however they might know the pronunciation of the name, but selling his birthright for a little bit of food. That is what I believe people do every single day. When I hear an officer violating somebody's rights, and he knows that he's violating their rights, he knows that he's violating a human right, and you say, "Why are you doing that?" And he'll go, "Well, I'm just doing my job." And I go, you know, that excuse isn't going to fly, right? When everything comes down, that's not going to fly. You've now contributed, and you know that you've contributed to the violation of somebody else's rights to such a degree, and you know it inside, but you're willing to sacrifice that. And so that's probably a good segue to for the spiritual side of it, because we all have this, we all have an understanding. Everybody, I guarantee you in this room, and we have 1,194 people watching live right now. So we all know that this corruption has taken place. But what is the solution? Because what I speak about on a daily basis on this channel is helping people understand that what they've been told is in the scriptures, what they're taught and how they're taught is the lie. That the lie that they think, the lie is the way that they understand the scriptures, but actually in the words of Christ, he's telling you how to escape. He's explaining to you what this is. And by and large, the religions, Christianity, everybody, they deny these things. If you want to be a Christian today and be at a church, you basically have to ignore about 95% of everything that Christ said, because you wouldn't find it easy to follow that guy's terms when he says, "Let the dead bury the dead," right? Basically, take care of yourself, follow me. So there is this understanding and wisdom in those words. So I try to explain people without a religious bent, right? I'm not supporting any religion whatsoever. Religion is the way that this has been controlled, this guilt control matrix. And so, and I, you know, I posit to everybody that Christ wasn't speaking about a religion. In fact, on the contrary, he was destroying the idea of religion. He was opening up people to the idea of what love was when he reduced basically the 10 commandments down to 2, because they encompass everything. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, thy soul, and their mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. In those 2 lie all the law and all the prophet, he said. So just in those 2, both love, right? Love the Lord thy God. Now, who is that? Well, in his mind and what he was speaking of, it was in him. The kingdom was within you, he said, right? So we individually have the power to escape this, and we individually have the power, and then collectively, as we're individualized, right, getting away from this Vesca Pisces system where all of our minds are interlinked and we are pushed to have a consciousness, a singular consciousness. There can be a singular consciousness, but that consciousness and what we are made of is what is being abused.
Well, I don't talk, or certainly in the books, I don't talk about the you know, if you like, 5 sense manipulation without talking about the nature of reality. Because I said earlier that, you know, you can connect the banking scam from Middle East wars and connect them to the nature of reality, and more to the point, the suppression of the nature of reality. One of the biggest hijacks that is so fundamental to the control of humanity is the hijacking of what we call science. Science is not the independent pursuit of knowledge. It is operating within a straitjacket, which I call scientism, which is another religion, a belief system. You know, when I see people like Professor Richard Dawkins at Oxford University, who's always railing into religion, which he has every right to do. It's just his opinion. But what he doesn't realize is that he is the high priest of his own scientism. Mm-hmm. This is that the mainstream orthodoxy of science, which despite the existence of quantum physics, still goes about its business as if this is a solid world and the five senses are all that exists, basically, in terms of life. And the orthodoxy is mainstream science orthodoxy. That's the religious orthodoxy of scientism. And anyone over the years in science who's questioned these norms, these orthodoxies, has been ridiculed and dismissed and marginalized by mainstream science, because whatever mainstream science believes in the moment is the orthodoxy that has to be defended from all challenge. And then eventually, enough information and evidence has come about to move that orthodoxy just a little bit, because we can't go on believing that this is so-and-so, because it's obviously not. But then it solidifies again, and the same process starts. And anyone that's talking about life beyond the perception of the body is kind of a weird person who not really scientifically credible. But what I'm saying, and indeed, of course, the evidence is gathering all the time, is that what we need to do is to realize that the I, the eternal I, is not what you see in the mirror. That is the vehicle for the eternal I to experience this reality. And when the body's cycle is over, that real I leaves the body and continues its eternal exploration of infinity. So what is this eternal I would bring it down in the simplest terms to the fact that we are all points of attention, points of observation within one infinite state of consciousness. And you can call that state of consciousness God, call it what you like, that state of consciousness. And we are a point of attention within it. Now that point of attention can be so focused and narrow and programmed through the body and the world of programmed perception that I've talked about, that you can perceive who you are to be your name, your race, your religion, your income bracket, and that's who I am, that's me. No, that is a series of experiences, labels for experiences that you are having. The real I is the awareness that is having those experiences, and they're not the same thing. Because once and this is what this cabal wants to do. This is why it works so hard and has worked so hard to give us a self-identity and get us to accept a self-identity that the I are these labels, which are just experiences. Because once you can get people to believe I am these labels, then these other people here who believe they're a different set of labels can be played off against each other and divide and rule. So you can have income bracket against income bracket and class against class and religion against religion and race against race. And it's this illusion of the real I that allows this divide and rule to happen. And if you also realize that death is an illusion, it's just that the end of a cycle of experience within a certain range of frequency we call the world, then this mad dash from cradle to grave to get what you want and all this stuff and walking over people to get there, it all kind of calms down, because this is not 70 years and 10 and that's it. So oh, go, yeah, we got to go race everywhere. We haven't got much time. You've got forever. You got infinity. Chill out. Enjoy the moment. And, and realize that the moment you perceive as time is actually an eternal moment, an eternal now. And even time is an illusion of this construct of experience that we're having. Now, once you start to self-identify with being the consciousness having the experience, an eternal expression of consciousness, which can be the size of a pea or infinite, depends on how much we want to expand our consciousness to tap into it, then you start to see life in a completely different way. And one thing you stop self-identifying with once you realize the true nature of the I is little me. I've got no power. You've got as much power as you want to tap into. And the idea is to so focus attention and self-identity on the labels that you can play them off against each other. And look what's happening now. The labels are subdividing and subdividing and subdividing so that people are self-identifying now through this manipulation with narrower and narrower senses of self. All this LGBT, blah, 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 it's like an alphabet, right? No, look, you know, do what you like is my philosophy, so long as you don't impose it on anyone else. That's the big thing with me. But don't get caught in the idea that all these letters in a line getting bigger by the day, no, make that the hour, are who you are. It's not. It's what you're experiencing. And if you fall for that as a self-identity, as the I, then you can be played like a violin. And that's what's happening.
You know, it's funny, the labels that you speak of, I talk about boxes within boxes, is that when somebody comes to me, you know, and if they want to ask me a question about what it is that I believe, they'll ask me, are you a Christian? And the very first thing I say is, I don't know what your idea of Christianity is, so I can't answer you in the affirmative, because I would be answering what your belief system is of that. And considering that there's 30,000 plus denominations, I guarantee you that whatever I would agree to isn't actually what I believe, so I won't answer you. But that's a box. And also these labels, you know, you've been castigated as well as I have. I know that you've got 30 years of being beat up on. So I won't pretend to have the equivalence of that, right? So, but I mean, I get death threats. I'm called Satan. I'm called the devil. You name it. And all of these are boxes. They call me a Gnostic, Luciferian, you name it, right? And the reality is that they don't recognize that they're trying to beat up the box. So hopefully, if they can damage the exterior, that everything else that I've said might go away as well. And the only reason why they're upset, David, is because I've destroyed their identity. I've destroyed their false perception. Otherwise, they wouldn't be upset, right? So, I call them, and that's what you've done.
I call them IMRs. I am and after that comes the label. I am man, woman, this, that, the other. And once you're an IMR, then your self-identity is little me, because IMRs are basically 5 sense constructs of perceived identity. And, you know, the reason that people want to label everyone else is because that's all they perceive of themselves. Once you self-identify with labels, then you're going to perceive everyone else to have labels. And when you are someone like me, and clearly someone like you, who will not be labeled, they can't work it out. Or you've got to be something. I mean, you know, I've been called everything under the sun. You know, I find it quite funny, because this is the other thing, you see. Once you self-identify with being the eternal I, the eye of awareness, of infinite awareness, then what people say about you, it goes in one ear and out the other, doesn't touch the sides, because you are not offended, because you're not self-identifying with what they're attacking. You know, being offended has become weaponized. People are being encouraged and pressured to be offended by more and more things, because that provides more and more excuses to censor what they're offended about, right? This is why it's happening. And the more you subdivide senses of self-identity, as this string of letters gets longer, the more you're going to have reasons for people to be offended, and the more excuses you're going to have to stop people saying what they're offended by. Being offended is a choice. People who are confident in themselves and confident of what they're saying and confident of what they stand for do not want to silence people having a different opinion. They're quite happy for their opinions and their views to be challenged, to be questioned, because you're confident that, you know, they'll stand up to that challenge. If you're not, you want to silence people so they're never challenged. And see, this is how it works. There is an agenda which is being pushed upon us, and one of its expressions is the transgender agenda, which is not about protecting transgender people from discrimination. That's just the original excuse. That's just the foot in the door. You talk to people who have been through the transgender transition, I mean, physically through surgery, who've regretted it, and you talk to them about what happens when they try to speak out and warn other people to actually think a bit longer. They get abuse from the transgender lobby, and they attempts to silence them because they're not singing from the song sheet that the agenda wants people to accept. This is why the ultra-Zionists attack Jewish people who question the behavior of Israel, because it's not about protecting Jewish people from discrimination. It's about protecting Israel from exposure and challenge. So all these things are quite blatantly just part of what I call a gigantic protection racket, protecting people that deserve challenge and being exposed from actually having either. And so what you have also is this whole agenda, and it is, and I've charted it back in the last book that you've mentioned, back at least to the 1920s, and it will go back further, of the mass movements of people from one part of the world to another, into Europe, into the United States. It's an agenda. You can chart it back. This is not just happening. It's happening because it's being made to happen. And here's a rule of thumb, if you like, for is it the agenda or not? Very simple question. Am I allowed to have a different opinion about it? Am I allowed to have a say about it that's different from the official version of this subject or this situation? If the answer is no, and it increasingly is, but certainly in terms of the mass movement of peoples and a transgender, the answer is certainly no. You're not allowed to have a different opinion, because if you do, you're immediately called a bigot, a Nazi, a racist, or whatever, because it's a very simple thing. If having a debate would mean you would lose, you don't have the debate. You shut it down by hurling abuse at people and using censorship to stop people saying things you don't want people to hear. So this is what is happening. This is why we're not having a debate, is because they would lose. I mean, if we had a debate about male-female biology, and one side in the debate is saying that men and women are not biologically different, well, you ain't going to win that debate, are you? I mean, you're not. I mean, you know, have a look in the mirror. You're not going to win the debate. We're different. It's just a different vehicle to express a different experience for our awareness. That's all it is. Chill out. Same with race, all of it. So you're not going to win the debate. So you shut it down, and you have professors of biology fired for having the audacity to say, actually, men and women are biologically different. So this is why the debate's being shut down, because they can't win it.
Well, I'm quite honestly, I'm ecstatic that men and women are biologically different.
Oh, what a bore! What a bore! If we were all the same.
No
Why don't we
kidding.
celebrate diversity instead of using it as a vehicle to silence people and abuse people? Okay, I mean, I don't care. I'll tell you now, I couldn't care less if this is black, white, Jewish, Hindu. I don't care, Chinese. It's just a vehicle for my consciousness to experience this reality. And once you start getting, because this is the thing, you see, I mean, everything's an inversion. The whole world's an inversion. Look at those people who are obsessed with race and everything's about race and racism. Well, what are they? They're obsessed with race. They
Division.
judge people by race. They don't judge them by their consciousness, but by race. And then they castigate everyone else as racist when they're absolutely racist because they're obsessed with race. They look at someone and they say, he's white, he's privileged. What, the white guy sleeping in the street every night? That white supremacy, is it? It's ridiculous.
Well,
I won't stand for it, and I won't be silenced on it either. So you have this inversion where people are obsessed with race, call other people racists. People who call people sexist when they're obsessed with the sex of somebody. I mean, we're just conscious of having an experience, but they can't see that because they are absolutely addicted, and that's what it is, and perceptually programmed to perceive only the 5 sense level of experience instead of the infinite level of the true self.